My first experience, practical experience with flaming was this little device here. The idea is that I can apply flame to a bed, to anything, to a row. What I do is I go over, I actually go over the rows that are planted just before the seeds come up. And this thing is very useful for times when a crop, for instance, a crop that comes up much sooner than other crops, where I just don't, there's no point in going to get the tractor and putting the flamer on and doing the whole thing just for radishes or something that's quick. So all the beds are prepared ahead of time, and then I just take this flamer out just before the crop comes up and go along in the mark and flame the mark where the cedar mark. And it kills everything that's germinated, and the crop comes up right behind it. Sometimes it literally, as the crop is coming, is actually cracked the soil. And when I flame it, it's just, it's literally hours before it emerges. But when it comes up, there's no weeds available, no weeds left. The flaming is very effective on weeds that are newly emerged, small weeds that are just emerged. It's less effective when the weeds are a little bit bigger, 2 or 3 inches tall or so. Still works, but sometimes you have to go a little slower or use more heat. It's also not particularly effective on grasses, unfortunately, because any grasses or any weed that comes from deeper in the soil and not right on the surface doesn't get hit or can regrow. I found that the flatter the surface is of the stale seed bed, the better the flamer works. It's really important. If there's any ridges or lumpy soil, the weeds manage to, the flamer deflects off the lumps or the ridges. So I've experimented with different ways of preparing the beds, and flat is important. Works really well. I found that grasses are a real problem. The problem is that the growing tip of the grass is slightly below the surface, so the flamer goes over the top, kills the top, what's visible, and a few days later the grass reemerges. One way that I think I've dealt with the problem is to flame a little later where grass is a problem, because for some reason, at later time the grass the growing tip has actually come out of the soil and is vulnerable and I can hit it with the flame. The ideal way to use this technique is to prepare the beds way ahead of time, as many weeks even ahead of time. What I try to do is get an area all fertilized, ready to go, and all the beds actually physically made. Then I start at one side, and I have to plant some early crops early. I plant them and do the flaming, whatever flaming I can, and then flame ahead. I always flame a week or so ahead of the actual planting. For those beds which I'm not planning to plant for, say, 4 or 5 weeks, I may actually go do a tillage with a rotavator, a very light tillage with a rotavator, before I even get to the flaming, and then they're part of the sequence. I actually have some fields where I make it a cycle, and I start back in the beginning again, re-prepare the beds and start all over again. Spinach is a crop, for instance, where every week I plant 2 beds, and I always have flame the week before and flame right after the planting, and then have flamed a couple weeks for the beds yet to be planted and tilled 4 weeks ahead of time.
Vegetable farmers and their weed control machines. In this video, we visit 9 vegetable farms in 3 New England states to talk with growers about their weed control equipment and how it's used. They will describe a variety of cultivation tools and approaches to weed control. Hopefully, their knowledge and experience will help you get a better understanding of cultivation equipment and techniques. Matching cultivation tools to the soils, crops, weeds, and other particulars of a farm can be a complex task. Growers that are trying to reduce or eliminate their reliance on herbicides need information that will help them make good decisions about cultivation and weed control. Extension, research, and the private sector working together can generate that kind of information. Funded in part by the USDA Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, promoting environmentally sound and economically viable agriculture. This video was produced by Vern Grubinger, University of Vermont Extension System, and Mary Jane Else, University of Massachusetts Agroecology Program.